Welcome to today's deep dive. We're doing something a little different today. We're actually bringing you into the room with us to look at a really fascinating piece of source material.
Yeah, it's quite the document we have in front of us.
It really is. So, for you listening, I want to set the scene here. Imagine we're looking at this highly structured, just intensely academic presentation deck.
Right. Very minimalist.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
got this strict design language, like pure white backgrounds, hex code FFFFFF, deep grays, navy blues, maybe some slate gray in there.
No flashy 3D graphics at all.
Oh, yeah, none. No weird gradients, no heavily edited stock photos, just raw, impactful data. And the mission of this deep dive is, well, it's buried in this deck.
Yeah, so what we're actually looking at is a massive macroeconomic, socioeconomic, and environmental evolution report.
Yeah.
And it covers the 1960s all the way through the 2020s.
Which is a huge chunk of time.
Right. And it's specifically focusing on IDA and IBRD recipient countries.
So the International Development Association and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
Exactly. The core lending arms of the World Bank. And the deck refers to them as the IBT nations.
Okay, so IBT nations, who exactly are we talking of here?
Well, broadly speaking, these are the global middle and low income populations. So we're essentially tracking the global majority over the last half century.
Which is just wild to think about. I mean, think about the world 60 years ago. We are about to track what is arguably the greatest, most volatile human transition in modern history.
There really is.
It's this epic story of skyrocketing wealth, extended lifespans, and, well, a pretty devastating environmental bill that is just now coming due.
Yeah. And the executive summary of this deck, it really lays out that contradiction immediately.
Right, the dashboard on the second slide.
Exactly. It's this 4-quadrant dashboard, very clean. And it hits you with these 4 massive data points right out of the gate.
Okay, lay 'em on me.
First, you got population growth, which is slowing drastically. Second, youth literacy breaking past 92%.
Which is incredible.
Absolutely. Third, you see this massive, 4 times jump in real wealth. But then in the 4th quadrant, greenhouse gas emissions are just exploding.
Exploding how much?
From about 9.5 billion tons to over 37 billion tons.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's the friction right there. You've got this triumph of human capital completely slamming into planetary boundaries.
Exactly. And to understand how we got there, we have to start with the foundation of any economy, which is the people.
Right, the demographic turning point.
Yeah, the deck has this really striking double-axis line chart, and it shows the historical inflection point for population growth in these IBT nations.
And the numbers are they're staggering. Like in the 1960s, the population growth rate peaked at 2.3%.
Which is incredibly high.
Right, but then you follow the line and it just slides all the way down to 0.9% today.
And we really need to pause on that 2.3% figure because, abstractly, it might not sound like a huge deal.
It sounds like a normal interest rate.
Right. But in demographic terms, a population growing at 2.3% is doubling roughly every 30 years.
Wait, really? Every 30 years?
Yeah. So if you're a developing nation in the 60s already dealing with severe poverty, that means every single hospital, every school desk, every paved road, you have to completely duplicate all of it in just 3 decades.
Just to stay exactly where you are, not even to get better.
Exactly. It's a treadmill that's just running way too fast.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because as that growth rate slides down towards 0.9%, the deck shows these nations entering this really specific window.
A demographic dividend.
Right, and the chart points out this massive drop in the child dependency ratio. It plummets from 74.4% down to about 44%.
Yeah, and the dependency ratio is basically the mathematical heartbeat of an economy. It measures the number of children, so ages 0 to 14, relative to your working age adults. So when that ratio is at 74%, almost all the money those working adults make just goes to immediate consumption. Food, basic clothes, shelter.
There's no savings.
0. There's nothing left over to build factories or modernize farms.
So it's basically like a massive cargo ship. When the dependency ratio is that high, the ship is just loaded down with dead weight. The engine is barely pushing it forward.
That's a great way to look at it.
All the fuel is just maintaining momentum. But when the ratio drops to 44%,
the ship offloads the dead weight and doubles the engine size. You suddenly have this huge bulge of working age people with way fewer kids to feed.
so they can actually save money.
Exactly. And those savings go straight into the banking system, which the state or private sector then uses to finance infrastructure and industry.
But the chart has this little tail raise at the end, right?
Yeah, the old age dependency ratio.
Right. So the demographic dividend is basically running out of steam. And I mean, it sounds like these countries threw this massive economic party, and now the demographic hangover is starting.
That is exactly what's happening. The old age dependency ratio was super low for decades, around 6.76%, but now it's creeping up to 7.7%.
Which means the working age bulge is retiring.
Right. And while 7.7 isn't, Japan levels of aging, the trajectory is irreversible. The era of limitless, cheap young labor is over.
Wow. Okay, so they had a strict time limit to get rich before they got old.
Precisely. And they couldn't do it with everyone staying in their rural farming villages.
Which brings us to the next chart. This stacked area chart showing the rural versus urban split.
The urbanization scissors gap.
Yes, it literally looks like a pair of open scissors. The rural population growth line just collapses, drops below 0.4%.
Yep.
And cutting aggressively across it is this explosion in megacities. The deck notes that cities with over 1 million people have absorbed nearly 21.4% of the total population.
And you just have to picture the sheer logistical scale of that. We are talking about physically uprooting hundreds of millions of people from subsistence farming and dropping them into hyperdense urban centers.
In a single lifetime. I mean, how do you even build that? You'd have to build a new Seattle or, I don't know, a new Manchester every few months.
It's an absolute nightmare for urban infrastructure. You get slums, stressed water grids, traffic.
But economically,
Economically, it's the ultimate engine for efficiency. Delivering services to 10,000 farmers spread across a huge province is incredibly expensive.
right, but if you pack them into a 5-square-mile district,
Your delivery cost plummets, and you create specialized labor markets. A multinational company won't build a factory in a rural area, but in a megacity, they can hire 10,000 workers by Tuesday.
which directly converts all that demographic potential into actual kinetic wealth. And we really see that wealth explosion on the next slide. It's this stepped area chart showing GDP per capita.
In 2015, constant prices.
Right, which is important because it strips out inflation. So we're looking at actual real purchasing power. And the chart sets the starting benchmark around $955.
Right?
And by the end of the timeline, it multiplies out more than 4 times, landing over $4,340.
A four-fold increase in actual purchasing power for the global majority.
Yeah.
I mean, that fundamentally alters human civilization.
It's staggering. But how did they actually do it? I mean, they didn't just farm 4 times faster, right?
No,
Hey.
absolutely not. And the percentage stack bar chart right below that GDP chart explains exactly how. It tracks the industrial structure.
The shift away from agriculture.
Exactly. In the 60s, most labor was trapped in subsistence farming, which has a very low ceiling for productivity. You can only grow so much crop.
And you're completely at the mercy of the weather. There's no leverage.
Zero leverage. But the chart shows this definitive shift. Agriculture gets squeezed down, and high-tech manufacturing, transportation, and modern financial services swell up to dominate the GDP.
It's like a societal software update.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like you're upgrading from this basic command line agricultural operating system to this highly complex, multi-layered service and manufacturing OS.
That's a great analogy. You move a farmer into a factory, and suddenly the economic value of 1 hour of their labor skyrockets because they're operating capital-intensive machinery.
And then eventually they move to logistics or finance.
Right. But there's a catch. You can't just run a high-tech manufacturing and service economy with an uneducated workforce.
Right, you can't just tell a farmer to suddenly manage a global supply chain.
Exactly. The wealth generated in those cities had to be aggressively reinvested back into the human mind.
Which brings us to the human capital section of the deck. And visually, this is where the deck uses this really striking slope chart.
Yeah, comparing the historical baseline to modern data.
And the numbers are just a total triumph. Youth literacy, so ages 15 to 24, it soars up to 92.3%.
Which is phenomenal.
And primary school completion rates have just stabilized at these incredibly high levels.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, hitting a 92% youth literacy rate is arguably one of the greatest public policy victories in history.
Because it's a permanent upgrade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once a generation learns to read and do math, they do not let their kids regress. It permanently shifts the economic potential of the entire nation.
But within that, there's an even more specific victory. The deck shows this this dumbbell plot right below the literacy slope chart.
Gender parity data.
Right. It contrasts the historical differences between men and women. And historically, the junior high graduation rate for women was stuck around 50%. They were way behind men. But over the decades, the female graduation rate surges past 75%. And the visual shows the gender parity index, the GPI, visibly squeezing together.
It's approaching absolute parity, which is 1.0.
Right. And looking at this, I'm just in genuine awe. We are talking about millions of women who can now read contracts, write code, and participate in the global economy.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture again, educating women isn't just a moral victory, it is the ultimate economic multiplier.
Because you're releasing half your population into the skilled labor pool.
Precisely. If women are restricted to domestic labor or subsistence farming, you are operating your economy with half your brainpower sidelined.
It's like running a race with one leg tied up.
Exactly. Pushing that female graduation rate past 75% dramatically shifted the economic output of the IBT nations. Plus, educated women invest differently in their children.
Right. They have fewer kids, which helps the demographic dividend, and they pour more resources into the kids they do have.
Which compounds the economic growth generation after generation.
And we see that reinvestment pay off physically, too. Moving from the mind to the body, there's this smooth line chart tracking life expectancy.
This is one of the most profound charts in the whole deck.
It really is. It shows life expectancy jumping from an average of just 45.3 years all the way to a historical breakthrough of 70.6 years.
Adding 25 years to the average lifespan changes the entire psychology of a nation.
Well, yeah. If you think you're going to die at 45, why would you take out a 30-year mortgage?
Or invest in a decade of higher education. You wouldn't. But when you expect to live to 70, the future becomes an asset.
But the deck really zeroes in on why that historical average was in the 40s. It wasn't because everyone just got old and died at 45.
No, it's because early childhood was incredibly lethal.
Right. And there is this steep waterfall chart for under 5 child mortality. And this might be the most emotional data point in the entire presentation.
It's sobering.
For males, the mortality rate dropped from over 104 deaths per 1,000 live births down to about 42.
And for females, it dropped to near 36.
I mean, a mother in the 60s had a 1 in 10 chance her baby wouldn't see kindergarten, and they slashed that by more than half.
And mechanically, this is the direct result of the wealth we talked about earlier.
How so?
Because you can't fake a drop in child mortality. It is the ultimate proxy for eradicating absolute poverty.
Oh, because you need the infrastructure.
Right. You need prenatal care, massive vaccination campaigns, paved roads to deliver the vaccines, and basic sanitation in those mega-cities so kids don't die of waterborne illnesses.
Okay, so let me pause here for a second, because here's where it gets really interesting.
Go.
If we have this massive, highly educated, urbanized population, right, and they're living into their 70s, this should be a total economic utopia.
It sounds like one.
Right. But the deck, it takes a very dark turn right about here.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Because every single one of those triumphs had a cost. And the structural cracks are starting to show.
Let's start with the labor cracks. There is a cluster bar chart mixed with a scatter plot that looks at job quality. And despite the GDP explosion, male vulnerable employment is just stubbornly fluctuating between 49 and 55%.
Vulnerable employment is basically the informal economy.
Okay, wait, you just told me they are educated, they are literate, they live in modern megacities. Why are half of these men stuck in informal, vulnerable jobs with zero social security?
It's a great question. And it comes down to the growing pains of structural transformation.
Okay.
The urbanization happened so incredibly fast that the formal economy, registered corporations, financial firms, with actual payrolls, it simply couldn't scale fast enough to absorb millions of new city dwellers.
Oh, so there's a bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people still have to eat. They still have to pay rent. So a massive informal economy forms. Street vendors, unregulated day laborers, gig workers.
And there's no safety net there. If they get sick, they just fall right back into poverty.
Right. So despite the national wealth going up, half the workforce is still living on a very fragile economic fault line.
Man. Okay, but as bad as that labor friction is, it's nothing compared to the environmental cost.
No, the environmental data is.
Yeah.
It's alarming.
There is this massive, just looming, stacked area chart. It tracks greenhouse gas emissions, excluding land use change and forestry, and the emissions have surged from 9.5 billion tons to over 37 billion tons of CO2 equivalent.
And to really understand that, we have to look at the tree map on the same slide. It dissects the pollution by industry.
Right. Who is making all this carbon?
Well, the power industry is the absolute behemoth. It accounts for 11.77 billion tons.
Wow.
And right behind it is transport, pushing over 3.6 billion tons.
So this is the ugly truth of the economic miracle. They didn't build these megacities on solar power.
No, they achieved it through a massive, unyielding reliance on fossil fuels, sometimes accounting for like 30% of the energy structure.
I mean, to build concrete for a megacity, you need coal. To electrify the schools, you burn coal. To fuel the trucks delivering vaccines, you burn diesel.
Exactly. The economic engine was a combustion engine.
And the human cost of that is mapped right out on the next slide. It's this heat map of environmental risk. And it connects directly back to that health data we were so excited about.
Yeah, the air quality data.
It says over 90% of the population in these countries is exposed to PM 2.5 levels that exceed WHO standards.
PM 2.5 is fine particulate matter. It bypasses the lungs and gets straight into the bloodstream, causing massive cardiovascular and respiratory diseases.
So over 90% of the population is breathing toxic air daily.
It's a tragic irony. The exact same fossil fuel engine that bought them a 25-year extension on their lives is now acting as a hidden tax. It's causing chronic diseases that eat away at the very wealth they just built.
Which perfectly brings us to the final visualization in the deck. It's the ITRO slide, basically. A stark radar chart.
Comparing the 1970s to the 2020s.
Right, across 5 dimensions: economy, education, lifespan, carbon reduction, and job quality.
And the shape of that radar chart is completely distorted now.
It really is. The area covering economy, education, and lifespan has just ballooned outward, like a monumental triumph. But the axes for carbon reduction and job quality have shrunk inward.
Forming this really lopsided, totally unsustainable shape.
Because the traditional model, high carbon, high resource consumption, low quality jobs, it has hit a hard ceiling.
Right. The thesis of the deck is that the next half century absolutely cannot be about the quantity of growth anymore.
It has to be about inclusive, green, and resilient quality growth.
Exactly. If they don't transition, the environmental collapse will literally erase all the human capital gains they spent 60 years building.
Which leaves us with this final, really lingering thought to mull over. I mean, for 60 years, these nations essentially traded the health of their environment to build up the minds and bodies of their people.
They extracted from the earth to invest in human capital.
Right. Now, looking at the next 50 years, the ultimate question is this: will that newly minted human capital, the very children who survived because of those health investments, who can now read, who can invent, who can organize, will they be the exact generation that engineers the green technologies needed to save the environment they sacrificed?
Can the cure come from the very process that caused the disease?
Exactly. Something to think about.